Hey guys, this will be video 3 for the how to design build a custom guitar using Stuart McDonald templates with an emphasis on the 58 Explorer. And if you saw video 1 from about 2.5 months back, you saw where I went into a really deep dive as to how to build either a mortise and tenon neck per 58 specs or this original or this bolt-on configuration. And I've already covered the fact, the history of this guitar. I sold this body, and in the event you did not see video 2, I sold this body to a guy, and he needed assistance finishing the guitar. So we came to an agreement, and I agreed, and here we are building the guitar. So, but I did mention to him that if I do this, I always like to do a video series in a vocational format, and it covers it really drives home two different things. It gives video documentation for the client to really see a lot of what I'm doing and what I'm thinking, and or offering suggestions and or options and things like that, so they can actually physically see something. And it makes it so much easier for me that I'm not having to stay on the phone all day long and talk to people. Not that I don't like that, but I need to be in the shop building the guitar. Okay, so on that note, as I used to say way too much, and I'll try not to start saying that again, I've been neck deep in literally building this neck and getting it machined. We'll talk about this in extensive detail in a little while, but this might look, well, you guys, if you're watching a video like this, you can already see all the enormous engineering that has taken place. I'm extremely happy with that. That's turning out really well. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about uh, how to build this out, because all these little components over there, these little blocks of wood, that is the neck. And I'm going to show you how to build a really, really like a master level a jazz guitar neck. This is how I used to build all my jazz guitar necks as well. So it takes a lot of time. It's very, very time consuming. But if you do all of these things, it really allows you to guarantee your session guitar player buddy up in Nashville or Austin or LA or Atlanta that, yeah, man, if you go on tour in pick your poison, Louisiana, where it's nasty and humid. I don't mean Louisiana's nasty. I mean the weather. The weather's really rough on wood. Or if you or the next day you're on a plane to, you know, pick your European country and it's a completely different climate. This baby will fly with you and she won't let you down, because I'm all about making certain that we seal the wood even on the inside. Because just because there's a fretboard, and I'm digressing a little bit, but just because there's a fretboard on here and there's a little plastic truss rod cover, that doesn't mean that if you don't seal all of this internal wood, this is unbelievably important. If you don't seal this wood and you just glue a fretboard atop that, and you come out here and paint this and stain it and do all that jazz and put oil all over the fretboard, the change in the humidity, according to where this guitar goes, it's going to travel right down that channel, and it's going to just saturate into the neck, and therefore you're going to have problems with the necks warping or twisting, especially maple, because maple is this is maple right here, but only for a little fillet. And I'm digressing too much, but it's critically important that you get all of this sealed really well with nitrocellulose lacquer on the inside. And then I'm even going to show you how we epoxy in a fillet, so that once this thing is finished, it is truly sealed in all areas. There are no areas that could risk being saturated by the humidity, okay, or drying out really bad. Okay, so let's talk about this body briefly. That way I can just get this thing off the table. I elected to go ahead and just cut a little fillet, and I actually machined it just like it was a fender type a neck, the actual neck itself, with the 5-inch radius and then the 1/2-inch rounded corners. And then I mixed up some aircraft grade epoxy, and I'll show you in a little while how to do that. and you let the epoxy kick on a molecular level for 2 or 3 minutes. This is a 24-hour dry time epoxy. I did this 2 days ago, and then just fit it in really well. I fit it in so well that I didn't even have to clamp it. And I have not pulled this tape off yet, so this will be an interesting revelation um, as to what you can expect. If you do a lot of clamping, well, you run the risk of it sliding around on you. And this little fillet that I epoxied in, let's just look at it first. Let me see if this is in the camera. Well, see the lights on that side, but you'll get a better view right here. But that epoxy, and I learned this from restoring an 80s Les Paul about 2.5 years back. Uh, if you wanted to watch that video series, man, there's like 30 something videos. We had a guitar that was just basically rotten. It really almost was beyond need restoration, but we brought it back to life, or I brought it back to life using the epoxy, and it tinted with the black. And once everything's sanded and leveled and sprayed, it was amazing. You couldn't even see joinery up in the body. This was an archtop Les Paul, so typically, and it was black. And typically, something like that, if you started turning it in the light, you would see where you did the joinery. But if you use the epoxy, it will not shrink. And then if you even tint the epoxy, the color that you're actually spraying and painting, it'll really help the fitment. Because I'm building this in the event the client said, "Wow, man, that is so cool how you did that over there with the mahogany neck. Is there any way we could do that with my neck?" The answer would be yes, but it would be considerably more expensive because that's a ton of work. So I'm not trying to up pitch the job, but I'm making certain that I cover myself by doing this repair, so that if he did say that, I wouldn't be going, "Oh crap, man! I just threw a piece of crappy wood up in there with some water-based glue, and that might show, and then I'll be fighting it." With this right here, I would be able to finish this, cut it off traditional, just like that one right there, and spray it, and you would never even know that it started out as a Fender type platform. Okay, and I'm talking too much about that. I need to reel myself in. So, well, actually, no, that's pretty important because I have to always remind myself these are vocational videos, in addition to being, a documentary for the client that I'm working for. But it also shows you guys that what I even mentioned in some of the ads when I was selling these is like, you don't have to stay with this bolt-on pockets. You could do exactly what we're doing here if you wanted to convert it into a traditional guitar. It's just that most people don't have the ability, to build their own neck. And it's not that they don't, it's just a really overwhelming if you've never done it before. But once you've done it about 30 or 40 times, then you realize, oh, wow, this is nothing but just a lot of table saw work, So anyway, so this will dry for about another day because this is actually still just a little bit gummy. I'm gonna let it dry for about 1 to 2 more days, and then I'll start doing all the leveling. And where I'm going with this is from a valuation standpoint, it'll greatly increase the value of this actual project if it is finished identical to this right here. Because where I'm going with this is when someone pulls the pickup out of this project that we're building, and they look down in there and they see this stain grade quarter sawn Honduran mahogany, uh, that's going to appreciate the value of that guitar probably about $700. I know if I was truly, a professional musician, I would know the difference what I'm getting if I'm buying a guitar with a Honduran neck. Because see, this thing's going to be all black where that one is, so they won't be able to see. They won't be able to see this quarter sawn. Let's see if I can get this in the camera. This is really important. They won't be able to assess the build the way you would with this one and see that, wow, that's like precision quarter sawn Honduran mahogany, et cetera, and things like that. So uh, I sell that to be really long winded, but to drive home the importance of, if you're the builder and you're building something for a client, always be thinking about the long term investment for your client, as well as that client may be showing his guitar to someone that commissions you to build a $4,500 guitar or a $5,500 guitar. And I've sold guitars for well over 10,000 before. Um, so don't be surprised if you get phone calls for stuff like that. Okay. But you will not get phone calls for stuff like that if you just came in here and, glued a fender type neck in here and didn't show the reveal. Even if you did all that beautiful work, and I kind of was, it was okay what I said. What does it matter? It's under the paint. It's going to have this and this is a lot of general conversation, but we're gonna, trust me, we're gonna dive in pretty deep here in a minute when I start talking about building that neck. I made the statement, what does it really matter? It's going to be up under the paint. Nobody's ever going to see it. But I wasn't thinking about, someone taking it apart and looking down in it and realizing that, oh wow, this is some sort of hybrid, strange build where it was just some sort of, who even knows what this neck is under this black lacquer, and it doesn't even go up into the body. How was it glued on? Was it glued on with water-based glue? And if I bump it, is it going to just break off? Or is it going to be glued in a mortise and tenon fashion like that right there with epoxy? And that's what I meant by, it really makes a huge difference. Okay? So, way long-winded. Let's check, and speaking of that, let's check the time. 12 minutes of I don't know what you want. You can call that whatever you want to call it. But what I need to do first, I'm going to leave that on the table in case I want to talk about it just a little bit longer. But to drive home the importance of what I just said, and this nitrocellulose lacquer dries really fast. So let's do some seal work. And I've already cleaned this enough with compressed air. But if you blow it out with compressed air, that's sufficient. If you wanted to, you could wipe it with a little bit of lacquer thinner. But I would say let's keep her dry. And let me just do the job. And if it's in the camera, that's fine. If not, it's just out of the camera. But all you're doing is just sealing, the bottom and the sides, because and by using the nitrocellulose lacquer, it's going to dry so quickly that within about 30 minutes to an hour, probably not even that long, I would be able to mix up my epoxy. And once this, crap, I should have shown it dry. Once the truss rod goes in there, that truss rod is not flush with the top of the, it's not flush, it's down in there. It's recessed, not quite a 16th, but a little greater than 3/32. And it will get this little fillet right here epoxied atop it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, in the event I forget, just go to the last video, and if you see me handling, and I'm looking at it on the other table, you'll see me handling the flying V neck, and you'll see the solid wood surface. Okay. And the great thing about this sealer is, as I said, it'll be dry very quickly, and I'll be able to epoxy, just drop the rod in there and epoxy the fillet atop it. And what does that do? It guarantees that once you, well, first off, it reconnects the neck that you damn near cut in two, okay, with all that route work, which there's just no way around that. You just have to. You have to cut the bulk of the center out in order to get the truss rod in there, even if it's just a single rod bent on an angle. And it just guarantees that it epoxy glues it back together. And then it also, but to me, the most important thing, well, that's pretty important, but it also allows you to have one solid surface once you elect to glue your fretboard down, that now your fretboard is glued to a 100% wooden surface rather than glued on this side and on that side. It just guarantees you have a better transfer of tone. Okay, it's okay to be a little sloppy because you'll be cleaning a lot of this off with lacquer thinner. You'll be sanding the surface just a little bit, but not too much. If you use really high quality Honduran mahogany for neck construction, uh, that's wood that you see right there was the exact top of that 3x4 that you saw, or I had already ripped it down to 2 1/4. I bought it. I buy them 3x4, and then I ripped them down to 2 1/4, just a little bit over 2 1/4, in case it shrinks as it acclimates. But I always machine everything S4S 2 1/4. So it's 2 1/4 wide here, and it is just whatever width you need for your tenon according to what your heel is going to be. If you had a really thick body guitar, well, then you're going to have to be S4S pretty tall out here so that you'll have a heel that goes all the way down. It's just common sense. You should understand that. I see I missed a spot right here. I started to just do every bit of this work, and then just do a video tomorrow and just talk about everything I had done. Uh, and even right now, there's a part of me that kind of wishes I had done that, but I really would have denied you the right to see some of the most critical stuff, even though it really slows me down. And uh, for a lot of people, this kind of crap is really boring. So, but if you're building a guitar that you expect to be worth, money, real money, you gotta think on this level. It's a little bit dry right there. I'm being a little sloppy intentionally just to force that in there. And the great thing about the nitro is it really soaks in. Doesn't have to. You're not painting it. You're just sealing it. Okay. And that's plenty. Yeah, that should be good. Okay. Uh, this is probably going to be a long video, and for the most part, probably 20 minutes of it will just be me kind of talking as I'm doing something. So it might not be very beneficial, but I can assure you there are going to be points where I discuss something just for 5 minutes that might be really beneficial for you if you're building a guitar, especially when I show you how to do all my little fillet work and basically um, turn this back into a tree. Because most people, they just route all this stuff out, throw the truss rod in there, glue the fretboard down, and it's a good build. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't expect to tour Europe with it and then fly back to the States and it be stable. I think this guy's name is Zach. Ask Zach. Oh, yeah, that is. I don't know his name, but he's a good guitar player up in Nashville. I didn't meet him, but I saw him playing one night. He's a really good guitar player, and he's a super good person as well. So he's a true asset to the Nashville community. And but anyway, Zach was talking about being in Italy, and he had this old Fender Telly that something he had put a neck on it that didn't have any finish on it, and he said it was a nightmare getting that thing under control because he was in a completely different country, and it had acclimated obviously to South Nashville where he lived, and it was great. But once he put it on that plane and flew it to another part of the world, uh, he said it was a nightmare. So importance of the nitro. Okay, so let's put that to the side and let that dry for a little while, and then we'll talk about. I tell you what, I'm probably going to do. I'm going to pause and get that body off the table, get this off the table because I've already talked about some of that stuff, and then I'm gonna kind of strip the table down to a more refined setup, and then that will keep me on point. Hopefully, keep this thing around 45 minutes or so. So let me pause, and I'll be right back. Okay, let's dive back in. The good thing about pause is you can pause for as long as you want. And I did just that, pause for about 20 minutes and just let this dry. And I cleaned it up a little bit and I started to remark it. And before I forget, James, if you're watching this video, and I know you probably are, we are not going with this fretboard. So you can put your cell phone down and don't worry about calling me. We're not going with that. Okay. Uh, I know that's the Pafejo or the Pao and we're waiting on Indian rosewood. But what I did was I went ahead and cleaned off the wash, and I want to just go through some of the things and show you what it is that I do as I'm building a neck. This is the beginning of the fretboard. You always want to monitor your build lines because you've got to stay on point and don't let things get sloppy. And if you clean something, or if you erase something, or if you sand something, make certain that you get those build marks back up there because these are all your critical reference points when you start using like your micrometer to like measure the thicknesses and stuff. That's the first fret location. This is the 11th fret location. So, and let me just do the job because I don't want to. This is not something you want to be sloppy about. That's the exact 11th fret location, which is in a completely different location if it were, and that's for a 25.5 inch scale. But if it was a 24 3/4 inch scale, it's in a completely different place. So that's what I meant by really design and lay out your plan your work your plan. That's the old saying. And then this one is extremely important. This is the 19th fret. Now you see the importance of making certain that you are truly, S4S. S4S, for those of you who may not know, means square four sides or surfaced four sides. And if it is surfaced four sides, like that large billet that you saw that was it was actually 2 1/4 by 4, but I bought it 3 inches by 4 inches. Well, if it is sent to me surfaced four sides, that means it is truly square and I can trust it to work from. And I did, excuse me, let me get a drink of water. I didn't want to talk about this, but I got to get this address this elephant in the room. It may sound like I'm drunk. I'm not drunk. About 2 months ago, I suffered a facial paralysis. The whole right side of my face was paralyzed, and it's called Bell's palsy. And I just started recovering about a week ago. And I'm not going to start talking about it, but James, the client, is very much aware of it. And I explained to him, I said, "Man, I can't do a video for another week or two because, man, I sound like Sylvester the cat, you know." So I apologize about my speech, but I'm doing the best I can. But I spent about 5 hours in conversation with my sister yesterday about some family matters and real estate, and land, and legal stuff. And I had no choice but to just talk all day long. And when you have facial paralysis, the worst thing you can do is talk. So I may have to end the video early, but that's why I sound like I'm slurring. So anyway, it is what it is, but I'm definitely recovering and I feel much better. So if I sound weird, I have not been drinking. It's probably been 5 years since I've ever had a drink. So anyway, keep up with all your points. Okay, that's critical. And what are these points? That is the beginning of the fretboard. And there's that that extended platform that we talked about for the Floyd Rose locking nut. That is the first fret. And make certain that you mark it on the sides right here, because in the event you lost that later on, you'd be able to reference it from there, or you could refind it. This is the 11th fret, and that's the 12th, obviously just for the middle of the scale, and that's the 19th fret, which is the pitch. That's the 2-degree pitch, which has not been cut yet. And then the tenon is just whatever you wanted to make it. So the most important thing I could explain here is, obviously, if there's a line drawn on this surface, it's critical. And I even write it in with ink, like that's the fret beginning of the fretboard, that's the first, that's the 11th, that's the 12th, and the 19th, and so on and so on. But where I'm going with this is when you start defining this center line here, because obviously all this is going to get cut off and rounded over, whether you do it by hand with rasp, or you do it with a machine, which I'm not even going to start talking about it. I do every bit of it with a router. It's terrifying. The bit is enormous, but I'm really good with that, and I do it with a router. I have this unbelievable jig that I designed to make it very safe, but I do like the first 95% relief with a machine, just as if it were built by a CNC type machine. But I route them on this angle. I'm gonna stop talking about that. But if you were to start shaping it by hand, you've got to define the taper. And if you hear people talking about, oh yeah, it's got the thick neck, the fat neck, the chunky neck, the wide neck, the flat neck, the boat neck, the offset neck. I think Eddie Van Halen, his radius was fatter down here than it was up here, and that was a real bizarre design. And I've never played that neck. I would love to see what it was that he was into. It's an asymmetrical neck. Excuse me. But nonetheless, you got to have a certain thickness at the first fret and a certain thickness at the 11th fret. To me, that is far, far more important about the way the neck feels than how wide. Well, I take that back. The width of the nut is actually critical, but how thick is it? Because I've built guitars before that have basically like a 15/16 inch thick first fret location from the top of the fretboard to the back of the neck, and I've built them an inch thick up here. And to me, I don't have any fat on my hands, and I'm not a big guy, but my fingers are not short, but man, I got a pretty big bite with my hand, and I like a really fat neck. But as I explained to James, buddy, we're building a Ferrari here. This is with the Floyd Rose and the locking nut. You don't put a fat 58 neck on that 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 car right there. That dog won't hunt. So, but I don't want anyone to pick this guitar up, and especially James. I don't want James to pick this guitar up and it feel like an Ibanez. I want it to feel like a Gibson, and we've already covered this. I want it to feel like a little bit slimmer, early 60s profile, a little bit faster profile, but not chintzy. And when I say not chintzy, we achieve the not chintzy profile by making certain that we hold a little bit of thickness here. And when I say thickness, I think Gibson kind of hit the nail on the head finally with a neck profile that they call the Carmelita, and it is 7/8 inch thick at the first fret, and it is right at exactly 1 inch thick at the 11th fret. So that is obviously about a 1/16 of I'm sorry, that's about a 1/8 of an inch taper. But typically when I'm building my 50s type guitars, and the last Explorer that I built, I held it exactly 1 inch. It was actually just a little bit under 1 inch thick at the 11th fret, and it was exactly 7/8 inch thick at the first fret. But that's not where it ends. Where it's really defined is when you do this radius. And I'm not going to pull the bits out because we'd be here for 3 hours. But the short is, if you want a fat, chunky, little fat 50s type neck, you want to be routing your neck with a 7/8 inch, 7 and then 8, and I can hardly say it, 7/8 inch radius round over. But for this guitar, I'll be cutting it with a 1 inch radius round over. And I'm going to stop because since I don't have the bits, I can't show you. But this neck right here, this is a 1 inch radius round over. And you might look at it and go, "Ooh, it's kind of thin. I don't know, it's kind of small." Well, once you get your fretboard on there, and as I mentioned, obviously, James, we're not going on this fretboard. It's way unattractive and would take way too much work to get it to be darkened up. But once you get this fretboard on here, it feels unbelievable as far as the thicknesses. And it is 7/8 of an inch thick at the first fret. And I think this one's exactly 1 inch thick at the 11th fret. Okay, so I'm gonna stop talking about that, but I just want you guys to know when you're building your guitar, don't dare rough out that finish line. You better be holding this neck at least about a 16th of an inch thicker than where you're going to be cutting it. And I'm going to draw this line, but it's probably going to be about right there, and it's probably going to be no, not that far away. I'm already pretty close on this one. Uh, yeah, that's probably going to be it. And I'm about to erase this, but basically, don't let it spook you when you start having to relieve this material, because you've got to do it. You got to get there at some point. And I'm pretty dangerous. This point that you see right there, that was basically the almost the rough machine work. I only sanded that for about 5 minutes to get it down closer to where I wanted it. But I'm considerably thicker out here, and all this material down here, especially a lot of this up here, is going to get sanded off. It's going to be something like that. And I'm about to erase every bit of this because I don't want to forget that I'm just cowboying it, and then go over to my sander and start sanding that. And I use an oscillating sander on that. All the more importance to have this S4S. I can use my oscillating sander and just kind of play it by ear, and just sand back and forth. Never stop. Always be moving. If you stop, it's game over. It'll just put a horrible divot in it. Okay. And I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but again, I've forewarned a lot of you guys on the front end. I talk a lot only because I know there's so much that I need to say, but I just can't. You've got to get in the shop and just get behind the tool, and just get comfortable with what it is you're working with. Uh, so anyway, there you have it. That's the start, and we've redefined one of the 12th location, just kind of to have it so that in case I need to start checking half scales and stuff like that, I've got it there. Okay, let me check the time. Yeah, 33 minutes. This is going to be a long video, so I hope it's a lot of good information. So the next thing would be, a lot of people might say, "Why did you go ahead and cut that off?" Well, because this initially was right here, okay, and if I had have cut it square, well, then I wouldn't have had anything to take down here. Okay, so be very thoughtful of the wood usage. And the cool thing about it is, this is actually I hope I don't lose anybody. This is going to taper a little bit. It's going to be closer to 5/8 of an inch thick in this location, but out at the end, it's going to end up being about 9/16. Well, I say it's going to be exactly 5/8 here, and it's going to be exactly 9/16 on the end down here. I should be showing this right here. It's going to be 5/8 inch thick, just right there. Not up in here. That's too thick. But it's going to be 5/8 of an inch thick right there, and it's going to be 5/8 of an inch thick right there. And then whether this tapers down or tapers up or is symmetrical, like a flying V, or this could be a jazz guitar with the real big D'Angelico headstock, the monstrous, big three tuners on either side, or or maybe 4 on the top and 3 on the bottom for a big 7 string. It's irrelevant. But and you can see with this one, see the subtlety of the taper. It's 9/16 of an inch there, and it's 5/8 of an inch thick right there, and it is beautiful. And that, what is that? That's a jazz guitar. That's how you build a jazz guitar. Very None of your bolt-on type necks are done that way. They're just 9/16 of an inch thick, and then they just kind of sand them to blend. But it's cool because once it gets up here, it's even thicker, and then it thins back out as it joins into the neck. This is a really exceptional sample to show you where we're going, because obviously there's a truss rod in there that's accessible from from the end. And if in the event I forget, the funny thing is every bit of this woodwork that I do up here also allows you to have something to put that one screw in to hold the truss rod. If it were a Gretsch, you could put a screw on either side and it wouldn't be as important. But with the Gibson-esque type design, you got to have some substance there to drive a screw through. And you got to also make certain that you don't let your truss rod come way up here, because you'll be eating the candy bar. You will not get a screw through there, okay? So don't make that mistake. But this is a good sample to show you what our target is. That's the fillet, obviously, and regardless of, even though the fact that it's going to be covered up and no one's ever going to see it, do beautiful work, because this is an area that gives you this is an area where you can practice your woodworking skills. Make sure you cut real nice, clean, round corners for your little fillet when you get ready to epoxy it in, so that you're always kind of practicing, because you're going to get to a point where one day where you're going to have to do something. And I'm looking at this area here, right here, because I had to do that on a guitar where originally it was going to be a much thicker neck, but I changed it, and I had completely forgotten that I had buried that truss rod a little bit lower. And sure enough, when I machined down, it started getting a little bit thin, and I could feel it. And I had to do this real beautiful little inlay right there. It looked great. It's actually upstairs in my personal guitar. But nonetheless, had I not always paid attention to doing good woodwork, that might have been that might have required I end up doing some spray paint work or something to cover that. Okay. Okay. What's important, and how does this go together? At this point, let me talk briefly about how you would route this, because the bottom of this truss rod is round. It's not flat. So I don't want a flat bottom. I want a round bottom. How do you cut a round bottom? Well, with a round over bit. But you don't just do this with one bit. And it's critically important that this is on center. This is 2¼ inches wide. So we all know that that's exactly 1/8 of an inch. So one of the very first things I did after I relieved this material right here, because that was the board, as I told you. That's where we're going to get the neck out of it. So that piece was cut off and out and off first, and then I made certain that I transferred that center line down the point. Okay, and I'm gonna leave that up there because there's something I need to talk about that in a minute. That's not real important, but it's kind of nice to know. But I wanted to identify that center, because when you're doing this route work, you're doing it on your router table with a fence on the right side, so that once it hits that bit, let me just grab a bit. So once it hits that bit, if you don't have the fence on this side, it'll pull over like that and it'll tear it up. So you're working with the fence on the right side, but the way you determine where the center is, start out with a 1/8 inch bit first, real low, and just set your table up. Measure it, get it really close, but then start making kiss cuts to identify where you need to put your fence. And I have my little fence on a pivot point rather than like a table saw where the whole thing slides. I just have it on a pivot point where I just start pitching. and then I can either move it over to the right or over to the left, obviously, but start making kiss cuts with this bit to identify that yes, I'm truly on the center. And obviously, there was at one time a pencil line all the way down through there. And once you see that you're cutting perfectly on center with that uh, 1/8 inch bit, you're now through with that identifying bit, and you are ready to move over to your true 1/4 inch bit. You don't touch your fence. Now you start planing, you start making passes. Do your pass, leave it down, and then pull back. Because if you do the pass and lift it up, it's going to be completely loaded full of all the dust, and you'll be digging that crap out. So do your pass and your stop. Have an identify. Look, you can see the little mark right there where it showed me where to stop, and that was the center of the bit. Cut it, pull straight back, and you'll pull it over, and you'll see that it's perfectly clean. And then if you make a mistake, you better correct it, because it's very important that this baby is exactly on center. You get this off, uh, you'd be better off to throw the neck away. Do not build a guitar if that gets off. Okay. So that's so important. And I'm not saying it because I learned my lesson once. I've always made certain I kept those perfectly straight. But speaking of that, let me sound the bits. Okay, so start making your sidewall cuts first. And I made this in, I think, 5 passes, maybe 6 passes. This is not a one hardcore, pass. You'll burn up your bits. And if you're a routing guy, you already know that. And then you do your final pass with your round over for the round bottom. And then therefore, your little truss rod obviously is cradled perfectly in its correct location. You finish out exactly in this location right here under your, you know, Floyd Rose locking nut, and then everything's real precise. Now, that's not what you're going to see, though. And what you're going to see after you're finished, now, if you didn't do the fillet work, that's what you would see. And that's not the end of the world if you did that. But what you're actually going to see after it's all finished is you're not going to see the truss rod. You're going to see all that woodwork. And primarily, like I said, for structural, but also so that you've got something to fasten the truss rod cover. But if you were to do a cross section, that's exactly what all is going on down in there. And you don't want to leave all that area open and void. And the reason you had to machine that bigger is because, obviously, because of this area up here is fatter. You can't, that should be common sense. You should see what I was dealing with right there. So this is a 1/4 inch route back here. That's a 3/8 inch route up there. There's no sense in coming up here with a large 1/2 inch and cutting all that wood out. Leave it alone. Leave all of that in there. It gives it much more strength. And not only do you have more strength, you have more a transfer of the tone, in the headstock. And I was about to say something, but I lost my train of thought. Oh, because it doesn't matter that this is a modern design under here. If you were building a true 58 replica, I mean, spot on, where you almost couldn't even tell that it was a modern guitar, well, I can assure you this will protect the industry, because if a company like Carter or Gruen or the pros out in Austin or you name it, if they pull this truss rod cover off of that replica, they'll look in there and immediately say, no, this is not an authentic 58 guitar. So I say all that to say this. That's really cool because it gives you the best of both worlds. It gives you a double adjustable truss rod, but it also protects the industry so that people don't get taken advantage of, because these guys are getting probably for 30 years, they've been so good at building replicas that they look authentically, they look authentic. They look like true 58 guitars. A lot of people, well, I shouldn't say that. Some people have gotten truly taken advantage of. And I'm going to stop because I don't want to start saying any names, but these are some pretty high profile people that got taken advantage of about, like old Les Pauls and Flying V's and stuff like that. So this protects the industry. and it gives you a modern design that gives you back relief or forward relief. And then once that cover goes over there, it looks like an authentic, you know what. Okay, so pull the cover off, and the industry is protected. Okay, all right. Let me check the time. I would pause, but I think I'll just get these bits out of the way and just think about what I want to talk about. Uh, I'll just kind of show you what would be the order of operation. I'm not going to do any of this work. I had kind of toyed with the idea, hey, I think I'll mix up some epoxy and show everybody how it's done. But basically, this is how I would do it. I would go ahead and mix up my epoxy. That bottom is sealed. We already know that. This is clean. You do not glue these in. You don't have to do any of that crap. This just gets laid in because you did such a phenomenal job engineering everything, and everything's so precise that it's just cradled in there, and you don't have to run the risk of this getting twisted or getting off or any of that stuff because you got that round bottom. That ought to be self-explanatory. The next thing, you've got your epoxy mixed up over there. You would want to put your epoxy on the bottom here and on the sides, and just get a little bit of epoxy on the top. And that's the whole reason for this plastic cover. It just keeps everything under control. And then you're going to be epoxying that in. And you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, it's riding high. You want it to ride high because you're going to be working fairly quickly. Well, actually, to be honest with you, no, you're not. You're not going to be in a rush because, and please do not tight bond this. Don't glue that in with tight bond. Tight bond, there's been so many times, I'm going to try to not throw it under the bus because I love tight bond in certain circumstances, but the epoxy gives you plenty of time to work in the event you panic or you screw something up and you need to unclamp it and refit everything. But tight bond has a real bad tendency to puddle, and if it ever puddles, forget it. That's a rubber gasket. And if you put too much tight bond in here, you run the risk of it not even compressing properly, and now you've got this ridiculous film up under it that is now defeating the whole purpose of you trying to reintroduce the mahogany back into the build. I should be showing that like that right there. So it is as solid of a neck as you could have gotten. And you're simply doing this top stuff right here. You know, you got your epoxy in there. Maybe four of these across there or something like that. And then obviously, I've already mentioned that it's not quite a 16th of an inch, but it's definitely over 3/32 of an inch deep. You got to have enough to glue it in. But don't let this get too deep right here. You want this final cut to be very, very, very close to the actual end. But make certain that you do cut it deep enough that that truss rod does truly bottom out back there. You wouldn't want to be too shallow out here because it would create a bow up, and that's going to create a really effed up neck. This is pretty important. Let's talk about this. Uh, what I'm talking about is this area right here had to be routed deeper, and you should be able to see it that the shelf starts right there. And if you didn't cut that deeper, well, then it's going to cause a gap. And see this line right here? That's where the gap would start. And now all the structural load of the truss rod is not going to be consistent. It's going to be more consistent. It's just going to be out of whack. Okay, it's very important that that ought to make perfect sense. But please understand, guys, that if this might be boring to you, there's a lot of guys out there that don't think on this level, and they need that this has to be driven home. That don't think you just route that and throw this baby in there, and then even if it's off a little bit, it starts working. If this thing is in some sort of bow, then all of the tension that you put either back or forward is taking place all the way up here at the top. And then eventually, somewhere down here, it starts taking a place. And then that's where you start getting a compound radius effed up fretboard. I've never done that because I know what I'm doing, but I imagine, and I may be overthinking this, but I don't think I am. That ought to make perfect sense, and I'm just going to stop. If it doesn't, rewind it and just think about the importance of whatever material you have here, that it is perfectly consistent in its compression once this all goes together. That ought to make perfect sense. And if you want to know the truth, probably even the most uh, beginning woodworker would understand the importance of stuff like that. And a lot of times, sometimes the guys that don't know what they're doing, they end up doing a hell of a lot better job because they really take the time to think through stuff and really consider it. And I'm going to go ahead and show you kind of this is how I'm going to do it tonight, and that right there will be sufficient. Those four, but don't do any of this crap right here. Don't let it get off, and it might start rolling because it could roll that. Make certain that any compression you do is very much straight down. Okay, and that what that guarantees you is that you really bottomed out that truss rod. Now, what happens here is this funky little design here. That's just that same exact bit, the 3/8 inch radius, where I machine these in long sticks and I have them in my storage over there. I pull them out and I cut that little shelf and I fit it in, and then that's going to go right there. Okay, and then you'll get another clamp up there, and then that's what it's going to look like tonight when it's dry. And look how much incredible support you gave back to the headstock area, so that if it did fall, man, she's as structural as possible. Okay, and that's why it looks like this right here, where it's a quarter inch, a quarter inch, a quarter inch, then it opens up a little bit, and well, it opens up to 3/8, and then there's that little wooden fillet right there, and then that fillet goes all the way out to there and gets shaved on that pitch. Self-explanatory. Okay, and then it gets a maple overlay. Okay, take the time. Wow, 52 minutes, long video. Let me pause, think about how I want to end the video, and try to make a graceful exit. Okay, should be able to finish fairly soon here. I had mentioned that I want to keep this on the table because really I have something important to talk about later on, if I can remember. And fortunately, I did remember. This is a paint grade guitar, so it doesn't matter what you put over here or the orientation. Don't do this kind of crap. Make certain that at a minimum you keep your grains going in a consistent fashion. But if you are building a stain grade guitar and it is going to be mounting onto a $7,000 or $10,000 guitar that you're building, you better be really, really uh, conscientious of what it is that you're doing, what's going on with the grains. So much so that when I'm building a clear coat neck, um, I go ahead and do most of the machine work where it's almost finished before I even glue. Excuse me. Excuse me. Before I even glue we call these ears, before I even glue the additional blocking on to create whatever it is profile I'm building. Okay, so let's say this was going to be a clear coat neck. Uh, this little corner right here, um, you wouldn't even be able to find the glue line because this is from actually the same billet but a different location. It doesn't matter because all this is going to be painted black. But nonetheless, if I were building up that profile, let me do this. This is pretty important because some guys would get lost really fast. Okay, so obviously that's going to be that's our target roughly. Okay, so make sure you're at least about an 1/8 inch big. That's going to go up there. 90% of it's going to get cut off. But if it were stain grade, that little bitty triangle right there is probably the most important block in that entire neck, because that's what the player's looking down at all the time. And if they look down and see it go from light color to dark, or a weird transition, man, if I paid money for that, I'd be pissed off, because that's stuff you should not do if you're building an extremely valuable guitar. And you can see the glue line right there if you're looking for it. There's a glue line right there, and there's a glue line right there, but you just really can't find it unless you're looking for it. And that's the way it should be when you're building a really high quality guitar. Okay. So, and it's not that it's complex, it's just be thoughtful of when you're taking this material out, because if this had to be, well, actually, as I already covered a little while ago, I did not cut that square, or I did this video twice. So I may have done that in the first video and then forgot. You might be thinking, well, wow, why did you go ahead and cut that on an angle? It's so that I could have some material to move down here that was actually already tapered a little bit, and it's going to be able to glue right into that location right there perfectly. Actually, that will be epoxy. I will epoxy glue that, and it will guarantee that it's incredibly strong, and it'll also guarantee that it allows me to glue it up on a flat surface like this right here. That's how this is going to get glued up tonight, on a precision flat surface, so that tomorrow when I pull it out of this gluing station and I flip this baby over, this top will be already at its pretty much finished location. Don't get in the habit of doing this crazy crap right here and then thinking, I'll work it out later on. No, don't do that, because I got to spend a little bit of time with this. As soon as I cut this off with a handsaw, a circular saw, but not finished. I made that cut because my circular saw was really deep and it was easier. I just buzzed it off with my circular saw because I have a jig that holds me straight, but that was not the finished surface. After I relieved this piece right here, then I put my routing template atop it, and I took my large routing. I had it on the table, but I thought, no, I did. Then I took this large bit right here, and I surfaced that down. That guaranteed that I was perfectly square right there, and I wasn't out here trying to sand it and get it under control. Once you define, this is so important. Once you've defined this surface here, the most important thing after that being perfectly flat and S4S. It's so important. It's so important that all this is S4S and perfectly flat. But once you go off this pitch, and I did go 14 degrees on that, which is really beautiful. It's just perfect. So, but make certain that once you go off that plane, don't let it start cocking with you, because this little design right here, if that baby starts kicking or twisting or doing something weird, it's going to show. It's going to show. Even the untrained eye will see that. So it's very important that obviously that stays perfectly true. Okay. So if you don't know how to do that stuff, give yourself a little room on the front end and be transferring dimensions from over here to this side and really work your way to the finish line. But I almost digressed, but make certain that that's perfectly true. If you're building a Stingray guitar, then take this material here and transfer it up to there, and that will guarantee that your grain, your annular rings are in a very close location, proximity to where they were, because that's how they grew in the wild. And if you want to know the truth, if you were doing that, you would try to want to select it from that area right there and move that up there. Excuse me. Okay. And that was a lot of conversation, but I think if you're truly sitting there getting ready to build a guitar and you just bought some Honduran mahogany that you paid about $150 for or something like that, this stuff is not cheap. Or maybe Carina. I've built a lot of Carinas. Well, not a lot. I've built a few Carina guitars, Carina is extremely expensive if you're working with the good stuff. And that's not something that you want to screw up or cut wrong. And then you don't have a beautiful piece of wood that you can put in that location. And if you see the little arrow on there, as soon as I had all this machined and ready to go, I made certain to put an arrow on that. Those little arrows are critically important if you're matching annular rings, because you'll get confused if you don't have that marked. If you don't have it drawn on there, you might pick this up and put it on like that, only to discover that you really screwed up and lost your orientation between the annular rings. Okay. I should have forewarned everyone on the front end. This is going to be an extremely boring video. It is not for entertainment. But if you're still here, you're probably definitely building a guitar, or you're James. So anyway, if you're still awake, James, I appreciate you guys staying in the ring with me. Let me look at the table and see if there's anything I should talk about. Uh, the, as I mentioned, if you don't know what you're doing, just start with paper. That's where I defined the 12-degree pitch in a. I may have said this was 14. If I did, that's wrong. This is 12. I took it 12 degrees, and the 12 degrees is beautiful. And if you see it on paper as I keep driving home, then, and if you like what you see on paper two-dimensionally, whether it's from the side or obviously looking at it from the top, then you'll be happy when you start cutting it out of the wood. And before I actually did that, I actually drew this entire template. I didn't use this piece of paper because I was just building the guitar from dimensions, Like I mentioned, I found the 19th fret location, and then I found the fretboard beginning, and then I just knew that wherever the fretboard began, to go out 15.5 millimeter and then pitch it 12 degrees. I was just drawing lines on the wood, basically. And then I was already anticipating a certain rough thickness here and a certain rough thickness there, and then you're just cutting it out. It's so thick you can't do that with a jigsaw, handheld jigsaw. Uh, if you're a real cowboy, you can do that with a circular saw, but make certain that you know what you're doing, and you know how to. I'm gonna stop talking about that because circular saws are really dangerous unless you know what you're doing. Okay, but I use my bandsaw, but you need to have a really good bandsaw. Okay. All right, I'm just going to stop talking because the picture's worth 1,000 words, and that's what I just showed you. It's not very romantic at this point. It's extremely ugly and all butchered up, but you got to make certain that you really plan your work and work your plan. Okay. And if you missed the part of the video where I talked about, I don't want to use this fretboard. This is actually, surprisingly, this is beautiful. It would be really beautiful, but it would require that I had to do a lot of stain work and oil work to bring it to life. And I don't want to fight it, but I'll keep it. I'll put it on one of my guitars or something like that, or either I'm going to send it back. We'll see. We'll see what happens. All right, check the time. Over an hour. I haven't done a video this long in an awful long time, so I'll try to leave the table nice and clean. I showed you how I'm going to be putting everything together. It will be all epoxy, every bit. I might glue this one on with Titebond, only because, yeah, this is good to cover. I'm going to cover this in about 30 seconds. I'm going to glue this one on with Titebond because I have an exceptional means by which to get a clamp here and a clamp there. But don't put a dent in your wood. Make certain that you have some sort of block to protect at least this side, because it's very important that once you glue these two together, because these came from that location in the tree. In the event your client said, "Man, I've been really thinking about that all stained gray guitar. Would my mahogany neck be as pretty as that?" All day long. And I'm not trying, again, James, I've already told you, I'm not trying to up pitch you to do something like that. I really prefer to build this thing black. I think it would be beautiful black. I'm just trying to show the viewing public that don't put a dent in this, especially down here, because once you glue that together, you'll have a hell of a mark right there, a maker's mark that you don't want to see. Okay, kind of common sense, but you'd be surprised how many times I've done stupid stuff like that, where I put a clamp up there and like, oh man, why did I not think about that and what it would do, blah 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 blah. So, all right. Just end the video. I appreciate you guys staying in the ring. Again, that was a very long video, and it will probably be about 2 more days. And the next time you see this neck, it's going to look very close to this right here, because time is of the essence, and I really want to stay on point with this build. And if anybody had any questions about a certain thing that I didn't cover, I got about 50 videos before this that I can send you to. Okay, so just let me know if you got any questions or comments, and we'll go from there. Thanks, guys.